Welcome to Poetry Changes Lives. Poetry and history and a thought for the day, each day of the year, in my little book. Here it is in the paperback version. It's a pretty unique combination, but I think poetry and history do go well together. After all, poetry was the first ever, before writing was invented in prehistoric times. You know, the only way to learn the history of the tribe was through poetry. It's the only way, the best way of remembering things. And poetry has evolved. It's always been with us ever since the dawn of time. And it seems to get more and more. It evolves. It's just as popular today, more popular than it's ever been. All over the world, people use history and poetry together, and poetry is used for healing, for inspiration, for legitimization even, and just for sheer entertainment. If you, in the Middle East, there are TV shows like we have singing competitions and dancing competitions. They have poetry competitions. Anyway, poetry to me is the spice of life. And I'm going to read today's extract from my book. You can get this at the poetrychangeslives.com website or direct from Amazon if you like. It makes, I think it makes a great present to give anyone, old, young, whether they're family, friends, colleagues at work. Everyone quite welcomes just a little opportunity each day to dip into a book, get a thought for the day, and a little poem. It's a very benign influence. Anyway, that's my sales pitch for the day. On this day, in 1595, the first performance in London of Shakespeare's wonderful play Romeo and Juliet took place. It's a tale of teenage love, violence, and death, and it's certainly, I think, the most sexually charged play that Shakespeare ever wrote. That may account for its popularity and the number of times it's been turned into a film, and it's still, of course, performed all over the world. Every day, I'm sure somewhere there's a performance of Romeo and Juliet taking place, and it contains some of the most beautiful lines Shakespeare ever wrote, I think, which means, to me, some of the most beautiful lines in the English language. If the play was just a story of teenage romance, I don't think it would have lasted as well and have been so well remembered. But as always, Shakespeare has a deeper narrative and deeper meanings. Romeo, for example, he's not just a teenage boy hopelessly, helplessly in the grip of adolescent love. The story of Romeo and Juliet is also the story of Romeo's growing into maturity and becoming a man who fights for, to redress the death of the murder of his friend Mercutio. And it's, the fact that it's a coming of age story as well, as kind of a journey from childhood to maturity makes it so powerful, I think. Shakespeare is saying basically that young love can be dangerous, particularly in his times, or in Italy in the 15th century or whenever it was. To be just a love-struck young man was quite dangerous. Young men in those days needed to be strong and vigilant and prepared to fight for their very existence, indeed. So, there's a lot of messages above the superficial story of two young people in love. However, not everyone liked the play. Diarist Samuel Pepys, writing in 1662, nearly 100 years later, said, after seeing it, "It is a play of itself the worst I have ever heard in my life." Luckily, most people didn't agree with that. Here are some of the most famous lines in the play. I think they're really wonderful in their imagery, and they're often quoted, of course. "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were." Well, that's Romeo in his sort of lovesick first flush of infatuation with Juliet. Of course, it all ended rather badly, but there are many lessons to be learnt in that. Shakespeare is an endless, a gift that keeps on giving, as people often say about him. And I think we're so lucky to have, in our DNA as English, British people, to have so much poetry, but especially Shakespeare. He was the first man to really take the English language by the scruff of its neck and shake it and put it all together, weave together all those strands of Anglo-Saxon and ancient Norse and Celtic and Norman French and Latin and Greek, and combine them into what we today recognize as the English language. It was Shakespeare who really put it on the map. And after Shakespeare, people realized that, gosh, they actually did have literature. And of course, he was lucky to be writing at the sort of start of the era of printing. The printing press had recently been invented and brought to England, and that, of course, greatly increased the number of people who could enjoy his work. So though he was lucky, he was also someone who, he was the right man at the right moment. He invented personally so many English words himself. It's quite extraordinary. We should be very grateful, and I for one am. Today I reflect on spirituality and the need to understand emotions rather than just be driven by them from day to day, as Romeo and Juliet both started off being. Thank you for listening.